What's up gamers, Dreamcastguy here, reviewing today, Control. In order to properly talk about this project, we first need to go into the nature of fear. Human fear. The fact that deep down, there is something inside you right this second that is absolutely terrifying. It can be the idea of losing your job or having to move away, or maybe just your imagination picturing giant monsters popping out and eating your face. Whatever it is, there's something very special about our each individual fear, and it's here, inside of your brain, that Control actually lives. This game is spooky, but it's not scary in the typical sense. This is not a game that's trying to just freak you out. Instead, it wants you to be stuck outside your comfort zone. It wants to lock you down in a place where you're uncomfortable and keep you there, and that is why I like it. Control is a very, very good game, but it's definitely not conventional. The biggest thing is that while this game manages to really creep you out, it's not really survival horror. The reason I say that is because in this game, keeping yourself alive isn't particularly difficult. Your gun has infinite ammo, you have special magical abilities, and for the most part, the monsters we face can be pretty much taken down if you're at least slightly careful. Instead, this game scares you because of what's actually going on within the universe. In this, we're playing as a woman named Jessie, somebody with some very special gifts, but also a thirst for vengeance. She has spent almost her entire life trying to track down a mysterious government organization that took her brother, and now she actually manages to find them. The game begins right as you set foot into their doorway, and it's time to really settle the score, but yet, as soon as you go in this building, you realize that there may be some bigger problems than just your quest for peace. Instead, it turns out that there is something called the Hiss. It's like an evil force that has managed to take over the brains and bodies of practically every single employee here, turning them themselves into twisted freaks that only want to kill those around them. Now, I don't want to go too much more into it than that, because the Control actually has a fantastic story, but I do think it's important to point out that this is not a game that everybody's going to understand. Control can be a little bit confusing, because the way it actually unpacks itself is completely unique, which is that instead of playing this game as a character, we are Jessie. We are inside her head. We can hear her thoughts. We can hear when she decides to lie to another character, or when she's actually afraid of something she's about to have to do. And so because of this, it makes it where she doesn't give you all the information at the start. As you're playing through Control, you only get these little slices of the information you actually need to keep going forward. Because think about it, when you're sitting there, you're not constantly explaining the world around you to yourself. You don't think that information because it's just so obvious. Instead, Control wants you to constantly be hungry for what's coming next. And really, that's a pretty easy thing to do since Control is very addictive to play itself. So basically, this is a third-person shooter. You're going to be exploring different floors of this lab and trying to seek different answers, and along the way, you are going to be getting into tons and tons of different fights. But here is definitely where the game shines very bright, which is that just using these fight mechanics is really sharp. I always thought that some of the best games manage to make you feel strong in a way that isn't exactly obvious, and this game does that. At the start, you have just a singular gun, a pistol with bullets that constantly grow back, so you have to hide behind cover and shoot enemies in the head to be careful not to die yourself. Now, something I want to point out is that this is not a game with auto healing. The only way to get health back is to kill enemies. Whenever you blow people up, they drop these little like bluish coins which refill your health. They let you heal up after every single encounter, which means that if you make a mistake or you hide too much, the odds of you dying go way up. Thankfully though, there are a lot of weapons at your disposal. During the course of your journey, you're going to get a lot of opportunities to find some really insane upgrades. Now, these can be things like by actually going out and exploring, you can find different parts, like extra weapon upgrades that'll let your gun magically transform into different stuff, like a laser beam or a shotgun or a full-blown minigun that you can hold in your hand. And since the bullets always grow back, it just kind of comes down to whatever your personal preference is for fighting style. But more importantly than this is the fact that Jesse has magical abilities. The main reason this lab exists is to test a wide range of very peculiar paranormal objects, things that'll let you actually control things around you. Like one of the first things you find, it gives you telekinesis, so I can lift up any object near me and shoot it like a bullet, which was my very favorite thing to do. And then the more you use this, you can get special talent points to up the skills you like most. So I can make it where I can throw something at like 1,000 miles an hour and knock somebody over even if they have a giant shield. And then you yourself can actually unlock an ability where you get a shield and you can actually hold up things in front of your face like a giant barrier to keep yourself protected. You can get an air dash. You can constantly skip around even if something's actually too far away, or the ability to actually just pick people up. I mean, there is a lot of different stuff in this game that is nice. Now, something I really loved about this game is that even as I was getting all these crazy supernatural abilities and becoming practically a god of this weird mythological science, none of it felt forced. I actually can't tell you how much of this is mandatory and how much is optional, because as you're playing it, it just gives you different quests. If you become close to proximity of a particular object, it'll give you a mission that says, hey, go investigate this, and I kept doing it. I love just the general moment-to-moment gameplay so much that I was constantly exploring even if I didn't have to. I found almost every collectible, every weird creepy thing, everything, including the crazy super abilities, purely by choice. It does seem like they may be skippable if you want to be completely hardcore, but I like that the game just constantly motivates you purely by your own enjoyment. And also, exploration is when you find some of the stuff that is the most messed up. So this place is full of tons and tons of employees. Thousands of people worked in this weird CIA headquarters style place, but now they're all gone. They're either dead or mind controlled, but their physical remains are still here. The stuff they worked with, their paperwork, their documents, and you can read all of it. I have found hundreds of different files, and I couldn't help but read all of them. Some of them are bored emails of somebody talking about an upcoming poker game, or somebody just talking about a weird time where they're trying to mind read. But what I love most is that this world feels 100% realistic. Like, one thing I discovered that really weirded me out because it was just so dead on was that at one point I was actually exploring this lower part of one of the labs, and I found a bunch of VHS tapes, and I started picking them up and putting them into TVs and just watching them, and one of them was actually a special message for children whose parents had vanished. It basically was like, oh man, it really sucks that your parents managed to get sucked through that interdimensional experimental warp hole, but that's just part of science. It was so bizarre, and it's so unnerving because it seems real. This is an actual puppet show that they filmed to try and help kids adapt to the concept that mommy and daddy were probably turned into spaghetti. This game is spooky because it seems possible, and I love that for it. It is so freaking sharp. The only real downside it had in the entire game is that it is possible to do things slightly out of order, and that doesn't always work. So basically, a lot of times in the game, you have a lot of free roam. You can get key cards and start going up and down the elevators and meet some of the survivors and take on their missions in seemingly any order you want. For the most part, there's not really like a programmed order of things that have to be done in a particular way. Now, this seems cool, but occasionally it does lead to a problem where if you meet somebody that you're perhaps not to have supposed to met yet, they'll say events that haven't taken place yet. Like at one point I went down into the basement, and I'm not even going to show you the footage here because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything, but at one point I went down into a basement and found a bunch of scientists working on some very weird stuff that was like bio-natural weaponry stuff, and they were talking about things I had not done yet. And to me, I was confused because I was like, okay, this doorway was open, I'm allowed to come down here, but I realized that the game didn't manage to properly contain me. It gives me so much freedom and so many abilities that after a while I kind of just wanted to run everywhere and do everything, and some of the stuff I managed to discover was a little bit of spoilers for later story elements. Even some of the documents you find that you can read actually explain stuff that you haven't yet seen yet if you're a little bit too thorough with your exploration. But to me, that is a tiny cost to pay for a game that is just so great. For a long time, if you've been subscribed, you know this, but my 3 favorite games ever are Final Fantasy VII, Alan Wake, and BioShock. These 3 games are beat for beat perfection, and this is a project that was made by Remedy, the creators of Alan Wake. And now, after almost a decade since that initially released, I feel like they've managed to come just as close to that perfection. This game is good. Do not sleep on it. Buy it at full price. This game is great. Even if you don't love horror games, I think that this is something that should get your attention. Okay, so we've heard a lot of good and a little bit of bad, but let's go over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Control a 9.5 out of 10. I'm a little bit nervous, honestly, that this game isn't getting a bunch of attention. I feel like this is something that more people should be talking about. More people should just be freaking out that it is so unique. So if you want to do me a favor, and honestly do this game a favor, share this video somewhere, or at least tell somebody about it. Just say, hey, check out Control. Tell people, hey, go watch some trailers. Make up your mind, because this is a game that deserves to be talked about. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.